Thank you very much, Lucas Buchholz, for joining me here in the for an interview on the Nordic Animism channel, and welcome here on the channel.
Yeah, thanks, Rune, for the invitation. Great to be here.
Yes. So you are the man you're the chosen one, chosen by the Kogi wisdom keepers, knowledge keepers from South America, and we'll get back to perhaps who they are and what they do. But can you start by telling a little bit who you are and what your background is for this quite amazing work that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, of course. I guess I lived a pretty normal life until I got an invitation from the Kogi to come to Colombia. Actually, I met them in Germany, one of the very few of these people who ever left their mountains in Colombia and their very remote location to come to Germany. And I've met one of the elders here, and we got to know each other. And I translated some of his conferences for him, and they also stayed at our house. And then he invited me to come to their village and to their country, to the mountains where they live in. And they asked me to write a book for them. And as I was up there in the mountains at a time in my life where I had taken that decision to go there, because I was also struggling to find what I want to do after having found my dream job, just to find out that it's actually not my dream job after studying and everything. But yeah, now I went there up in the mountains, and he said, "Okay, write that book for us." And I was like, "Okay, right. I have no idea how to write a book, but of course I'm going to try, because I don't know where to find food or water in your village, so I better do what you say." No, I'm joking, of course, but I did it, and it came out in German and in the first version, and now in English and French and many other languages it's available. And yeah, since that, I have been working with the Kogi following that
Mm.
invitation, and yeah, it has
Could
totally changed my life.
could you just explain who who are the Kogi? Because now we just introduced and started talking about them, but I'm not sure that everybody knows.
Yeah, of course. So the Kogi are an indigenous people. They live in Colombia, in the north east of Colombia, near the Caribbean coast, near the border of Venezuela. And they are one of the last descendants of the Tairona civilization. And the Tairona civilization could probably be named in one sentence together with the Incas, the Mayas, the Aztecs. So all these big, well-known cultures we know from our history books mainly. Um, and the Tairona have never been fully conquered, so they have, unlike the other cultures, so they have been able to keep their language, their tradition, their spirituality, their crafts, their beliefs, and have guarded them basically up in the mountains of the Sierra Nevada. And the Kogi are one of the four descendant tribes of this ancient people, and this is quite remarkable because they are, let's say, a mentality vault, a culture vault, a spirituality vault. So they have kept something that used to be, I guess, quite prevalent in pre-Columbian times, but has now become very scarce. And this is a huge opportunity for us because it actually allows us to right now, right here, experience an authentic way of living differently on this planet here right now in 2025 that we're recording this interview in. And it is actually not something that is from the past. It is actually a different
Mm.
perspective of how to be human, what it means to be human, the answers
Yeah.
that cultures hold to all these big questions, and that is really, really amazing. And of course, I've been reading about different philosophies and aspects and how you can see the world, but actually to go to a place and
Mm.
experience it, what it is to live within a large group of people. I mean, the Kogi are nearly 30,000 people, so it's not
Mm.
just a few hundred somewhere in the
Mm.
jungle. It's actually like a full society, of course, much smaller than our societies nowadays, but still existent with different villages and a whole
Mm.
system of logistics and everything. And that actually, yeah, really, really changed my life, and that's what I've been working with since the
Cool.
last, yeah, for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
since I met them.
And perhaps we should just flick in this place that you have a platform where there is basically Kogi knowledge keepers teaching online? Can you just plug for everybody
Yeah, of
where they
course.
can?
So after I finished all the research when I was at the Kogi's place for the book, they said, "Oh, there's another thing, Lucas. By the way, we want you to build an academy. We want you to bring the indigenous voices and to bring our knowledge to the world because the world needs it." And I was like, "Yeah, right." Of course, first of all, I have no idea how to write a book, and then now I'm supposed to build an academy. But now I did it actually, and it is out there, and it's called the Timeless Wisdom Academy, and it is an ever-growing collection now of the wisdom keepers actually speaking for themselves, teaching the knowledge, speaking from their perspective, speaking what they believe is important for us to know, for the world to know,
Yeah.
which is remarkable because this knowledge has been kept for 4,000 years, pretty enclosed, and yeah.
And we're going to put a link in the comment section here where people can find your online academy there. But tell me a little bit about, because my impression is that like when you hear about the Kogi, you just you're faced with such an incredibly, like you also described, such an incredibly different other basically way of being in the world, and that it's so fully formed, almost as if it seems almost like a time bubble or something, that these people have just basically somehow managed to stay completely out of contact with, or to completely safeguard their space from the influences of the cultural and social influences, or some of them. Can you tell me a little bit about how, how does their worldview work, and also about their specific knowledge keepers, and how they become how knowledge keepers and this stuff?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. No, you're absolutely right. It is so remarkable to have such a treasure vault of mentality, of culture, of perspective, of spirituality today, and in an ever growing, more homogenized, globalized world where we all start to think the same ever more. Of course, with variations, but bottom line, ever more homogenized, it is really amazing to have a different worldview. And of course, it is strange for us in the first. It is foreign. It is alien. It is, as you said, an other. But that is, I think, what makes it interesting. And very personally, I can say the biggest, um, biggest impact that encounter and that work with the Kogi had on myself is, I would call it a remembering. So for me, it touched something very ancient somewhere in my being that, of course, I also maybe felt before. I had an idea that maybe life was intended differently than we're living it right now, or there are different versions of how life could be lived on this planet. And that maybe our whole notion of evolution might not be so evolutionary after all. Um, but that um, there is there is a different way of this core of this being in the world, and mostly that was inspired, as you mentioned, by the wisdom keepers, the called mamos, the male ones, and the sakas, the female ones. And they have one of the most incredible, educations that I think exists in the world. So some of them, not all of them, I have to say, have a very specific education. That is, that they are brought as small children into a cave, or it could be Nuhui, a world house, which is also a dark place, but some still in a cave. And there they are raised for the first 9 or first 18 years, depending on the depth of their education. So they are only allowed to go out at night, only if there is no moon shining, to be basically in the darkness as much as they can. And the first time I heard this, I was totally in total disbelief that they would not suffer severe psychological damage. I was worried about child safety and all these things that come up in my Western mind when I hear that, of course. Um, and I asked them, why do you do that? And they said, well, it's quite logical, because a child will learn the things best that they're interested in. So if you reduce, not deprive, but reduce as much the inputs on the visual, auditive, haptic, or like smelling sensory input, they will start to be interested in thoughts and energies, because there is nothing else. You're in a dark cave, like nothing really changes. Temperature doesn't change, humidity doesn't really change. You hear more or less the same things, you see more or less the same things. So this is all reduced. So you become more sensitive to the subtler things because this very obvious sensory input is reduced. And they say
Mm.
then you start to be interested in the spirits. So they say, even though I've never been outside, I knew the spirit of the jaguar, I knew the spirit of the mountain, I knew the spirit of the tree.
Mm.
And the first time that these mammals describe when they actually left the cave, the first sunrise they experience in the morning when their teachers decided it's now time to step out, that their education is finished, that they're ready to go into the world, and they see the first sunrise, and the first time they will ever see with their eyes all the colors, all the complexity, all the vividness of our world.
Shit.
And they
Shit.
said they knew it, they knew the essence, and now only the form is presented.
Yeah.
And that gives
Shit.
them, of course, a totally different perspective on life and also how to guard life and how to take care of
Yeah.
it.
And as you say, like when you hear that story, the first thing you immediately think is, oh, that must completely destroy a person. But
Mhm.
obviously, this is an ancient culture that
Yes.
has like millennia of knowledge embedded in that way of forming a human being, and is like successfully forming a human being. By the way, I often think that's the case with initiatory culture, that
Mhm.
that it can appear abusive to our Western eyes, but what you actually see is cultures that are very competent in forming a human being. Cool.
Yeah, I mean they're also so in need of survival. They could not ever afford to just waste people and have them go crazy or die somewhere in a cave because there are not so many, and you need people to survive as a people. So as you said, this has been proven over millennia. So the Kogi themselves say they have an active memory of 4,000 years, where they actually remember what happened, how it happened, when it happened, and how this knowledge was transmitted.
Okay.
And
How is that knowledge um, transmitted or embedded in reality? Is it in songs or
Mhm.
stories or?
It is quite interesting because the Gurgi say that where does the knowledge originate from? They say, how
Mhm.
do you even get knowledge? And they say knowledge is, unlike we believe in the Western world, is not created or formed by our research, but it is actually like transmitted to us. So according to the Kogi, our brains are basically receivers of energies, of thoughts, of ideas. So the first thing that the Kogi always say is that every thought, everything that exists, every
Mm.
idea, every emotion has been thought or felt the first time once. So back in the ancient past, in the gray beginnings, there were like these entities that we call them gods or spirits or something like that, and they have created these thoughts. So the first time envy was felt, it was felt by some of these spirit persons, or the first time joy was felt, or a certain way of doing things. It was established back then. So it's not a human invention. The only thing
Mm.
we do as humans is receive this knowledge.
Mm.
And we, of course, receive all kinds of knowledge, positive or productive, and also destructive ones. So the question as a human is rather to navigate that spirit world and to see which knowledge is actually helpful, which should
Mm.
maybe not be in the human realm, which should be in the human realm, which is productive and not. And this is
Mm.
basically what the mammals are learning, and that's how they distinguish. And they say all of
Okay.
this knowledge comes from nature. So we had a
Mm.
very interesting conversation with one of the mammals, Mamo Shibulata. He's very famous. He's also in the Aluna film that maybe some
Mhm.
people have seen. And he said the only difference between the Kogi and us is that we have spent more time in nature listening to nature, have learned that knowledge, and have now transferred it, as you said, through song, through
Mm.
story, and just through teaching through the generations.
Mm.
But it's
Mm.
nothing that is inaccessible. Like
Mm.
if we just decide we want to take that path again and just spend a lot of time sitting in nature, sitting in the so-called sacred sites, the big rocks, the ancient trees, the wells, the rivers, this knowledge can come back to us. It won't in
Mm.
a day, it won't in a week, but they dedicate lifetimes and generations to it. And
Yeah.
this is an option for us right now, right here. If someone says,
Mm.
I'm going to do that, it's possible.
Yeah.
And they have done the same. It's just a
Mm.
few
Yeah.
millennia prior. No
Yeah.
difference.
I seem to remember that they have this. conceptualization of themselves always almost as like the last caretakers of the planet, that they're like that they're the elder brothers, and the rest of us who are basically running around destroying everything are clearly the younger brothers. So now they are actually starting to basically speak to the world, and your project is basically part of them wanting to reach out into the world with this wisdom.
Exactly. So they say the main problem of the world is forgetting,
Mm,
which is of course a notion that is totally mirrored, let's say, in the Vedic perspective, where you have the
mm,
Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, now the Kali Yuga. So basically, descendants of consciousness due to some cosmic constellations, or different explanations for that. So it is actually in many ancient cultures that
mm,
it's actually a notion that this
yeah,
descendance of knowledge is an issue, the forgetting. And the Kogi say that there will be some point where
yeah,
we've forgotten so much that we actually will start again learning from nature directly.
yeah.
And what we're also doing in the Timeless Wisdom Academy is putting that approach, how
Mm,
so people can actually learn, they can understand not so much what the Kogi are doing, but how they're doing it.
mm.
It's much more interesting because it's not about just copying the Kogi and becoming little Kogis running around and
No, no.
imitating the culture. It's really not the point.
Yeah,
The question is,
yeah,
how did they come up with this
yeah.
wisdom? How was it developed? How was it accessed?
It suddenly strikes me,
Yeah.
are they really Platonists? Like the idea that the Platon's idea that you're living inside a cave in complete darkness, and then a knowledge is actually a remembering, an anamnesis, where you are approaching the pre-existing ideas in the world. It almost sounds like Platon had he had a little bit of a point there. If we anyway, it's just sorry, it's just a
No,
thought.
definitely. No, definitely. I think that there are some similarities, and it's of course Plato is mostly known in our world, but it's of course not the only one. I mean, many
Yeah, yeah.
cultures have that notion.
Yeah.
Um,
The idea
and
of remembering is also
Mhm.
really important in Nordic conception. By the way, that there are specific rituals that have remembering as a
Mhm.
anyway. Yeah, cool. So this like incredibly impressive knowledge system. Uh, can you talk a little bit about how that is supposed to produce relations specifically to land and and perhaps ecological connectivity or knowledge?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll give a very concrete example. So the Kogi have live in these mountain ranges, which is the Sierra
Mhm,
Nevada de Santa Marta, and it goes up to 5,700 meters ish of altitude. So very high mountains right now, right
mhm,
next to the Caribbean beach. And the lower ranges of these mountains have been conquered, lost to the Colombian, or first to the Spaniards and then to the Colombian mainstream society nowadays. So the Kogi have lost parts of their land, and it was up to the middle ranges of the land, and there was extensive farming. They had illegal drug cultivations and everything. And now slowly they're getting the land back.
mhm,
And so they come now onto lands that have been mistreated, have been badly cultivated for at least 200-300 years in the maximum, and now they're slowly getting it back. And they have a
mm.
specific process now to recover and regenerate these
Oh,
lands.
okay.
And the first step that they say is they need to go on the land and identify the sacred sites. That's the first
Mhm,
thing. So you could call them kind of the acupuncture points within the territory. So
mhm,
actually the notion that we find in traditional Chinese medicine or ancient Chinese medicine of the meridians running, you have these points, and if you do
mhm.
something, you can have an effect somewhere else. And that is from the connection of the land,
Yeah.
something that the Kogi very much embrace. Even related to health, by the way. So, for example,
Mm,
if you have some sort of illness, they will look for the sacred site of the liver, for example, or the sacred site of a specific illness to
mm,
cure it. So they embrace that notion very strongly. And then once these sacred sites are identified on the land, then they will go and will look where they can find these subtle energies of the thoughts that have led to the destruction of the land.
okay.
So they will identify what have the people who have badly cultivated or mistreated the land been thinking? What kind of thoughts are they? Where do they come from? And where are they still lingering on the land? And
Okay.
they need to be removed. That's the first step.
Wow. 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 Also,
Because they need to,
notice how humanity is actually very central here, because often when you hear, for instance, the critique of what is sometimes called anthropocentrism, that is really a way of taking humanity out of the equation. But it seems that they are actually centering the humanity in the equation. It's so much like human. Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
no, definitely, and this is especially important because now, mostly in the scene of sustainability and these kind of things, we have this notion of humans being some sort of parasite to the planet, and they
Mhm.
couldn't disagree more. They couldn't
Yeah.
disagree more. They say we are the consciousness counterpart of the Earth. So our
Okay.
thoughts, our emotions
Shit.
are essential, maybe not for survival of the Earth, but definitely
Mm.
for for the
Yeah.
thrival
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is
Sorry.
something.
Could you say that again? We are the consciousness of.
Counterpart. Yeah, the consciousness counterpart. So, for
Okay.
example, if you have a relationship with your wife or anyone
Yeah. Yeah.
else, you ideally you are a consciousness counterpart. You hold
Yeah.
yourself accountable. You nourish each other. It's a thriving relationship
Mhm,
that we
mhm,
both
mhm.
benefit from. And if one
Yeah.
dies or leaves, if it's a thriving relationship, there will be a void. There will be there will be
Yeah. Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not work. And it's the same between humanity and the earth.
Yeah.
And this is according to the Kogi our role. So our role is to thrive together with the earth. And this have many ancient cultures have proven this through, for
Mhm,
example, the increase of biodiversity, the increase of soil quality, that we're
mm.
actually playing an important role as opposed to untouched wilderness, which is often,
Okay.
of course, a very colonial notion, by the way,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the idea of untouched wilderness. Because
Definitely.
most landscapes have never been untouched wilderness for many thousand years on this planet.
Yeah.
So but this can go both ways, of course. You can
Mhm,
have a bad relationship, you can have a toxic relationship, or you can have a nourishing and mutually thriving relationship.
mm,
But it will always be in relationship. Like you
mm,
cannot be outside of the relationship. But of
mm,
course,
mm.
it needs to be balanced.
Yeah.
It needs to be lived
So they.
lived in a nourishing way.
Yeah. So they identify sacred sites, and then
Exactly.
they identify, basically. It almost sounds like doing psychiatry on the spiritual structure of the relation between human and land. That's what it sounds like to my. It might be an incomplete metaphor, but so they look for those emotions and thoughts that have caused the relation to go bad.
Exactly, and it's something that might sound very foreign to us, but it's not. So we know that feeling. For example, if we enter a room and two people just had a conflict in there, and even
Hmm.
if these two people leave, we can sense it. Like we feel something is like a little bit of like thick air, maybe kind of feeling,
Mm.
or some places where bad things have happened, where murders have happened, or something like that. If we go there and sometimes you feel a strange thing. So it's not something that is totally foreign to us. But
Mm.
that is something they use consciously to work with the land.
Yeah.
And when they remove these thoughts spiritually, and this says is most important to reactivate the regenerative power of the earth,
Okay. Okay.
because
So they do ceremony.
yeah, they use ceremony. They use different ways. They're very Spartan in their ceremonies. So there is they use with very small tools like little pieces of cotton. Just collect these thoughts, bring them to specific places where they can be transformed actually, and that is one of the main things they do. They have some song, they have
Yeah.
some dancing, but very limited. So I would
Yeah.
call them very Spartan in their approach, and it's very quick.
Amazing.
It's very effective.
Yeah.
And then they will always first work with the so-called negative, and then they will start working with the positive and say,
Yeah.
okay, well, how do we support the land? How do we give gifts to the land to start that nourishing relationship again?
Hmm.
And because they say that our emotions as humans are the most nourishing thing that nature can receive.
Okay.
And it's we have
Hmm.
that same principle with the trees, for example. So, for example, we humans breathe out CO2, and the trees breathe it in. They breathe out oxygen, we breathe it in. So it's the same
Yeah.
kind of mutually
Hmm.
nourishing relationship. Why wouldn't that same be the case on the spiritual level?
Hmm.
Why would it not be the same?
Hmm. Mm.
And that is something that they tap into, and that is what they will do as a ritual. So they will most likely, in the process of regeneration of land, never really work on the physical level. So plant trees. They say planting trees is one of the worst things we can do because we're interfering with the self-organizing mechanism of nature. Our job as humans is to strengthen the energy of that self-organizing, self-regenerating mechanism, not to
Okay.
interfere with it. So
Okay.
it's a very specific and very, I think, very intelligent way of looking at it, and actually acknowledging the intelligence of nature,
Yeah.
and actually treating it with respect, and as we said, as a consciousness counterpart, playing the necessary role in it.
Absolutely amazing to hear about this kind of knowledge. Incredibly deep and rich, and as we've been saying, it seems sometimes when we've also been talking a little bit before this interview and so on, it almost seems that they're turning things upside down
Mhm.
completely, and then then things make, or from our perspective, it seems almost that they're turning things upside down. But can you tell me a little bit how how do you, in collaboration with these Mamo knowledge keepers, then aim to bring this healing of land relation into Europe, for instance?
Mhm. Mhm. Now, first of all, I think it takes us some time to unlearn our conditioning, to unlearn our Western belief that the world is random, that we don't matter, that it's no one cares what we think or if we exist. And first, this is like a deep process that is first happening within the human realm. But now we're also working on projects of bringing that actually to the land. So we are in the process of considering of buying pieces of land to actually apply these processes in Europe. Of course, we have been buying land back for the Kogi in Colombia, so they can do their work there. But they have asked us again and again that we should buy land in Europe because we need to start applying these things, and to actually learn the effects of ritual again.
Mhm.
That is something like, of course, we can talk about it here, and some people might say, oh yeah, of course, yeah, ritual is important. Some people might say, I don't believe in it. Okay,
Mhm.
but how do we get that knowledge to be lived? How do we get that
Mhm.
experience that we actually
Yeah.
understand that these subtle energies work? And that's what we've been doing also with many events, that when we invited the Kogi elders over to different countries in Europe, Germany, Austria, Switzerland,
Mhm.
Sweden, Estonia, France, so many countries we've been into. And now we are considering buying land in Sardinia, actually in the south of
Okay.
Europe, where of course heat and water is becoming more and more of an issue, and the
Mhm.
Kogis are very proficient in working with these things. And that's, I think, maybe where the pressure is right now, at least in Europe, the highest, concerning really the balance of nature, or where the
Yeah.
disbalance of nature takes really its toll right now.
Yeah.
We've
In Southern
heard
Europe.
about the burnings and all of these things happening.
Mhm.
So yeah, that is something. But of course, this is something we are not babies. We're doing baby steps. We're in our still learning, as this
Mhm.
is something we have not been practicing in Europe for many hundreds of years at least.
Mhm.
And this is something that needs to be reactivated
Yeah.
and remembered, as we said.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the meridians that you mentioned before? Is that what they call black lines?
Hmm. Yeah, they're called the black lines, or the Seshija, and it is quite interesting because the word black is in it, which is of course not very positively connotated in our most of our Western perspective.
Mm.
For the Kogi, darkness is the most important ingredient, together maybe with water, of life. So, for
Okay.
example, where do plants sprout? The seeds are put in the ground, so at the moment it's dark, and
Mm.
water comes in, so darkness and water are the two ingredients that make life sprout.
Yeah.
Where does the conception of human life happen? It happens in the womb of the woman. It's
Mm.
wet and it's dark.
Mm.
And where did maybe life on this planet start, if there's to be believed, in the deep sea? So it's dark and it's wet again. So
Mm.
it's the same principles we can find in many occasions, and darkness is something that is the key ingredient for this life, this very
Mm.
many cultures, like the yin, for example, in Chinese philosophy, the yin is also like the female aspect, or something that's sometimes called a female aspect, is also associated with darkness. So that fertility, that basis for life. And so the black lines are not called black lines for randomly. So there's a reason for that. And the black lines are basically the skeleton, and the metaphor that they use is the spider web. They say the spider web is something that shows a lot of how these black lines work. And this is not just a phenomenon in some regions or on the earth, but it's actually a cosmic phenomenon. So
Okay.
they actually say the black lines connect us to the outer planets, to the stars, to different galaxies, and are these lines where the energy runs through. And
Hmm.
apparently, that is something what we can see, that, for example, if lightning hits the Earth, it doesn't just distribute randomly in the Earth, but it follows specific lines where it runs. And this is something
Okay.
where it can actually be seen. They call this squachala. Squachala is like this running of the energy, like this thing. And if we block them by destroying it and everything, we are kind of creating disbalances. And they say that there are some of these black lines that are so essential that if they will be hurt, basically what we, I guess, in our culture would call a tipping point. So that we would actually destroy the energetic skeleton of the earth so deeply that we would have severe problems. And it's very interesting because they link the sacred sites, which could be called the acupuncture points on these black lines on this Ishija, actually to events. So they say, for example, the destruction or the
Okay.
damage of these sacred sites can lead to wars, can lead to illness, can lead to all sorts of issues, which we're trying
Hmm.
to solve on the human level, going in circles and circles and circles, never looking at the reason, or let's say excluding the non-human world trying to solve a war, because we believe it's a political problem and nature has no place in politics,
Hmm.
apart maybe from sustainability, but not in power politics or these kind of things. Which the Kogi say is a total ignorance, because
Okay.
we're not seeing things as they are
Yeah.
according to them.
So that a war would represent a rupture in these deep patterns of what we call patterns of creation, the spider web of yeah, creation. If the blackness is that darkness that stuff grows from, then these lines are creative lines. It sounds extremely similar to Aboriginal Australian song lines that are lines according that there would typically be a creator god or something like that that had traveled and then created the world from that. And you find actually very similar ideas in a lot of different cultures,
Mhm.
also
No,
here in Northern Europe. So yeah.
One of the ideas is that they say that energy will always find itself a path. So, for example, if you block a river, like many rivers in Europe have been straightened, but now we're getting more and more floodings, for example, because the water is looking for a path. So,
Mhm.
if the original path is blocked, it will find a way.
Yeah.
And this applies for many parts. For example, sexuality. I mean, just looking at the churches, of course, trying to exclude sexuality from priesthood has been gone totally wrong for obvious reasons. Without going into that, but we all know what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Because the energy will find its way, and
Mhm.
not in positive ways. And
Mhm.
that's the thing, not in positive ways. And
Yeah.
that is exactly what's been happening. So a war is basically the energy going on and looking for its path, but not in a positive way, because
Yeah.
we have been blocking, or like human affection has been blocking these kind of things.
Yeah.
And this can be through physical blocks, or also through again our thoughts and behaviors as
Yeah.
humans, because we matter to these processes.
So, how should we then address stuff like historical trauma? You mentioned having visited sites of concentration camps together with the Mamos, and they sharing their perspective of how we culturally deal with that history.
Mhm. Now, this is very interesting and also very very heavy topic, because of course, the Kogi are aware of what is happening right now in the world, with growing conflicts in Eastern Europe and also in the Middle East.
Mm,
And um, they see very clearly that even though we try to educate people, we try to create memorial sites and keep these atrocities in our memories, with the hypothesis that if we do so, they will not happen again.
mm,
And maybe they don't happen again in the same place and in the same way, but they do happen again in different ways and in different places.
Mm.
And this is because we're not transforming these energies. We're just kind of stirring them back up,
Yeah.
believing that this remembering will prevent it, but it doesn't. And that's what we're seeing right now in the world. Our hypothesis has failed. So otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing these kind of conflicts. And they say that there are solutions, and that, for example, this, however, cannot be solved purely in the human realm. But again,
Mm.
we have to go to nature. So this is something that is very important. The Kogi believe that we as humans do not have to solve our problems all by ourselves. So we
Mm.
can go to nature and ask for help. We can go to sacred sites. We can connect, and in actually connecting to the spirit world can help us a lot. For example, by processing atrocities, by processing intergenerational trauma, these kind of things. So this is not something that we humans are fit to do just by ourselves, obviously,
Okay.
which we can see. So the idea would be, for example,
It
let's
seems to me, sorry,
yeah,
sorry to
yeah,
just
please.
interject one thing here. It seems to me that, like, I'm a little bit confused when I hear the concept of intergenerational trauma. In some cases, I'm sure it's very precise, particularly
Mhm.
indigenous groups, but it seems to me that their concept of trauma is beyond what we would call intergenerational trauma. That their concept of trauma is like it has cosmological ramifications in how humans and human story and human remembering, is is inscribed in the deep patterns of how the world is basically connected. It seems to me that they're like, if we say intergenerational trauma, it seems that they're like four level above that in looking down at what's actually going on.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, one of the notions we often entertain is basically the idea that history repeats itself, and then we say,
Yeah.
why did we do that? We did all this work, and we did build all these memorial centers, and still we're having wars happening. But why all these memorial centers if we're still having wars? Like, what the hell is going on
Mm.
here? And well, obviously, that is not the most effective way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
So they say, if we go back to ancient times, all of these thoughts, all of these conflicts, let's say envy or whatever might be the reason, or the feeling of I don't know, of destructiveness for joy, or there are many things that of course play a role in that field. They have been created from someone, from some entity at the beginning of time, and they are the ones kind of administering that field of consciousness, and
Mm.
they're administering these thoughts, and these thoughts can be given back to that entity. They don't have to be in the human realm.
Mm.
And by ignoring, in a way, the negativity, or as only addressing it as in remembering and believing that remembering will address it in a way that actually solve it,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, which is obviously not working. We are not addressing the origins of these thoughts, and then we just,
Yeah.
well, that's just human nature. No, it's not just human nature. Human nature as such doesn't exist. We human, according to the Kogi, we're just receiving energies, we're receiving thoughts, we're receiving notions from everything that exists in the universe. So,
Mm.
for example, the Kogi have mammals just spiritually patrolling the outside of the earth, trying to keep as many of those thoughts outside of our human realm, which is planet Earth,
Okay.
as they
Mm.
can, to not enter and penetrate our field of consciousness, which are not helpful. And
Mm.
basically, the whole process is an organizing process of these thoughts, finding out what thoughts are at play and where do they come from, and can they be given back and neutralized and transformed. Going
Mm.
back to our example now of the concentration camp, of the
Hmm.
war
Hmm.
situation that we have, we can do that. So, for example, if we have in our lifetime, or our generations back, had any involvement with wars or atrocities, which I guess most Europeans have at some
Hmm.
at some point, and most Americans, of course, also, or
Mm.
many other parts of the world, we can go back and we can try and pull up all those memories and hand them over to specific sacred sites that have been untouched, mostly by human
Mhm.
doings, that have not been destroyed, that are in their original form. Handing that over. And this can take years. They say this can take maybe up to 5 years, for example, if you do it on a very regular basis.
Mhm.
But it is possible to kind of clear out these let's say remnants of consciousness, of thought, that are not supposed to be in our human
yeah,
lines or in our heritage lines, and actually giving it back and having it transformed through nature. And that is something we can do individually, we can do as
mm.
families. And if we do it well, they say, and this is where the intergenerational trauma comes in, if we do it well, we will not pass it on to our children.
So could that also be done on the community level?
It could, but of course it's more
Be-
difficult, because getting many people to do that is of course much more difficult
yeah,
than just getting your family to do it. So it would be
because
beneficial, but it's not easy.
like you're half German, right? And when we talk about remembering and the Holocaust specifically, my impression is that not only is there a very intense remembering in
Hmm.
German culture and a very and a very strong sense of guilt,
Hmm.
but that is also connected to the fact that in the last part of the 20th century, the Second World War has become the single most narrated
Hmm.
war ever in human history. I think 5 years ago, I heard somebody say that at that point, and now it's probably doubled. At that point, if you played all the movies about the Second World Wars and all the documentaries, it would take longer time than it took to carry through the Second World War. Point
And
being,
also,
and now it's probably double. Like this, it is the most storied
mhm,
uh, element in all of human memory. So when these people work with memory and they work with the way that we remember and how what that does to us, it seems to me that perhaps the storytelling itself, the story making, could perhaps be a way of causing a healing. And obviously, if that's just running free, directed by, well, capitalism basically, let's sell entertaining stories, then that is not created in order to heal the ruptures that created these atrocities. It is created, the stories are created to sell media, right? So, so what about taking this to national level in Germany and say, okay, we want to perform the healing that will, on the spiritual level, make sure that, and then that wouldn't only affect the German culture, the German self-image, and the German people. It would be a deeper healing that would that would touch the very roots of atrocity in our Western world, because that particular atrocity plays such an enormous role in people's self-image and their worldview. Do,
yeah.
do you follow my thinking? I'm just kind of brainstorming a little bit for
Yeah,
you.
no, definitely, definitely. No, it's you said something interesting. That I mean, it's totally. I didn't know that about the narration of the Second World War, but it's not only that it is not healing; it is actually worsening
Yeah,
the thing, because we're keeping it alive. We're nourishing the same energy and the same emotions. So
yeah,
when people watch these films, documentaries, they will experience the emotions again. And the idea is to actually free ourselves from these emotions. So it
mm,
is doing the exact opposite of
yeah,
what it's supposed to do. Well, I
yeah,
mean, maybe it's supposed to do exactly that, but what we would love to see, or
yeah, yeah.
what we would
I get
wish
it.
that it could actually transform. Um, yeah, I mean, to do that on a national level would,
Yeah,
of course, be the ideal case.
yeah.
That might
But
be. I don't know how realistic it is right now, because sometimes
probably,
doing that only in your own family. So I try to bring it often down to, let's say, smaller context, and this could
mhm,
be like with fractals. They can be applied everywhere. They can be applied
yeah,
on a planetary level. They can be applied on a national level, on a regional level. They can be applied in your personal life and also in your family. So
mm,
I don't know if there is something happening in a relationship. Let's say cheating, the same thing on a very small level. That's of course a lot less severe than the Holocaust. Can be applied
mm,
and can be done, and that's already challenging. That is
mm,
already challenging. So, for example, that is interestingly another point when we where the Kogi always say the way to change anything in the world is through two things, and that
mm,
is, they say, because I've asked them, I say, okay, we need to really do something about the world. If there's one thing, what would you recommend to us? And I recommended, oh no, take care of nature or whatever. And they said, take care of your intimate relationships. They say these intimate relationships are the main place where we replicate these processes, where we replicate
Wow. Yeah.
these patterns that we find in the larger world. And the second thing is, look at the way pregnancies happen and babies are born.
Okay.
So they consider the prenatal education much more important than the postnatal education.
Motherfuckers. Like, they had some like, really, really like like ideas you never thought about. Yeah. Okay. Prenatal education.
Yeah,
Dude. Yeah.
They
Wow.
say it's quite logic. Like,
Yeah.
why, if our bodies form during that time, and it basically gives us a strong starting point to our lives, why wouldn't our minds and our spirits form at the same time, and
Hmm.
at a very deep level? Not, of course, on our prefrontal cortex where we consciously think about stuff, but on a very, very
Hmm.
deep level.
Hmm.
And they say this is actually what happens. So you absorb everything, which is, of course, now slowly, slowly coming into psychology as well,
Hmm.
that that these notions actually matter, and actually how you experience your pregnancy, and how your birth when actually shapes your life.
Hmm.
So they pay extreme attention on those processes. Use the same techniques, the same cultural practices, which they call alunash gwashi, which is the speaking out of the things, clearing the thoughts, clearing the emotions, to actually make sure to have a good pregnancy and an easy childbirth,
Hmm.
which is gives you very good heads up in life and everything, and relates, of course, then again back to these huge topics which we are experiencing, war and everything. Because of, like, if you have a war and no one goes there, that is a different thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is, of course, depending on how we are as humans. So
Hmm.
yeah, as you said, many things we probably never thought about, and at least I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I think it's an incredibly interesting. And so you've been working with recovering sacred sites and these black lines in Germany and in Switzerland and basically throughout Europe. Is that then is this linked in with, I don't know, larger initiatives to do it on a larger scale? Because obviously, this is a very specific worldview that the Kogis are presenting that has a potential to bring perhaps cultural change. From our perspective, we would call it cultural change, but really, it's actually a change in how reality is linking human beings with the rest of the world. Is that being taken in by people who want to do it in yeah, Germany or Sardinia or where you're living?
I mean, more and more people are coming. So we're doing these tours with the Kogi elders now since a few years, and it's getting more popular every year. So this is
Mm,
something that people are longing for, are actually looking for. And of course, it is not easy to translate it, because you get sucked into these experiences. You learn something, and that's why we also did the academy, because we want, let's say, a companion, a way that people can, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, be remembered, have that input, listen to that, and actually get that, yeah, that reminder, let's say, of that world can be seen differently.
mm,
And this is, we're still building all of it. So we haven't done any larger initiatives yet. But the
mm,
most important thing for me is that people themselves learn how to read nature again. So I don't want
mm,
just a few experts who know all the knowledge and have been trained by the Kogi mamos, and then everyone else doesn't know it. But I want people to know about this. I want people
mm,
to understand that, of course, this knowledge should be treated with respect, but it's not out there and it takes, I don't know, generations to learn it. It doesn't. You can start right
mm,
now. And of course, to really be proficient in it might take generations. And it's actually, we had a quite
mm.
funny conversation with one of the mamos about it. And he said, why do you guys worry so much? Just if you start now, in 4 generations, you will have recovered all the knowledge. Like, what are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so, so that was quite positive and quite funny.
Yeah.
So I think it's not to put this huge weight on, we need to do it all ourselves, we need to do it all in our lifetime. Like, you can just crumble under that weight, like no one can
Yeah.
do it. But
Yeah.
just start doing the things,
Yeah.
start just taking that back into your,
Sowing the seeds, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it will
Totally.
grow, and it is
Yeah.
growing already. So that
Yeah.
is something I'm very, very
Yeah.
positive about.
Another thing that I'm thinking about, obviously, and this is kind of obviously a bit related to my own work, is does this involve like for instance, cultural naturalization? Can you just transpose Kogi knowledge unaltered from Sierra Madre to Germany,
Mhm.
or would you need cultural change to a kind of cultural adaptation or different notions? Like I immediately think about it because I think about stuff like there is ceremony that could be related to stuff like what they call black lines, and these ceremonies are there in our cultural memory, so they could be basically ways of working with this stuff. How would they how would they think about this? Like, obviously, these guys, these mamos, they have this incredibly deep spiritual education behind them, and that probably also means that they they see things very much from that perspective. So, what are your thoughts about cultural transformation, cultural naturalization of this knowledge of land connection?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I mean, the land connection knowledge is probably to some degree specific, but then again,
Mm,
not. So I'll give you an example. We went with the mammals to Switzerland, to a forest. Of course, different continent, different ecosystem
mm,
that they have no physical experience of. And we just went on a forest walk together with 40 Swiss foresters. And
mm,
because we want to say we want to bring the experts, we want to have like a high level conversation. And they just walk through the forest, and then we asked them after a while, so what do you think about the forest? And they said, yeah, it's actually quite good. They looked around. I said, but there is one type of tree, this one, they just pointed to it. You brought it here. It doesn't belong here. Well, why the hell did you do it? And then the foresters all started discussing, and they said, well, yeah, actually, it's true. This was brought from another part of Switzerland, from the higher elevations of the mountains. It was brought here about 200 years ago because there was a shortage of building material, blah, 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 the whole story. I said, I told you, this is not native here.
mm,
And everyone was like, but how do you know? Like, you've never been to this place.
mm,
And I said, well, we just asked the trees, which was
mm,
for them the most natural and obvious way.
mm,
But yeah, so of course that is not something we've learned in our schools or our universities. But then again, these skills that they have can be transferred. So you can learn things that work in different ecosystems, because on one level, life is kind of the same everywhere. You can, there's a spirit, you can talk to the spirit, you can get the knowledge. Of course, the knowledge might be different than when you ask the
mm,
knowledge in the Sierra Nevada, but on that level, it can be transferred. And that is, for me, the level that interests me. I mean, I'm not
mm,
very interested in the very specific knowledge of how they're doing this and that in the Sierra, because I don't live there and I don't plan to live there. So
mm,
I'm interested on that little bit more meta level
mm.
of knowledge.
Yeah.
Or a different example, for example, that they when the child is born, they work a lot with the umbilical cord and the placenta.
Mm,
Very a lot of rituals that actually anchors you in your life, and you can build your own sacred site that connects you whenever you have any problems in your life. You can go there and connect and do all of these things. And of course, we are born here. We have placentas. We have sacred sites. So that is something that can be transferred
mm,
and
mm,
that can be applied somewhere else. But
mm,
that is the level that is interesting, or even one level before. So the question is, how did they come up with that notion that the placenta is relevant for your life? Like,
mm,
how did they even come to that notion?
mm.
And that is, and why don't we, for example? And that is, I think,
Mm.
also very, very, very interesting. So
Yeah.
there are two levels that we are also teaching in the Timeless Wisdom
Yeah.
Academy. So the one is to really just ask ourselves the question of how this knowledge is even generated again, and
Mm,
then look at the level of the transferability of that knowledge. And
mm,
that is
mm.
something that, of course, is done also in community and in the academy, but it's also an individual process. We all need to
Yeah.
find out what it means to us.
mm,
because it doesn't matter what it means to you. It can help, but it needs to mean something to me.
mm,
And that
mm.
is a process that I think we need to go through, and it takes time. It is
Yeah.
something that's probably a work of a lifetime or maybe generations.
Mm.
But I think it makes sense to start, and you do see results, and
Yeah.
that is at least the approach we're taking right now.
Cool. Are there any more things that you just want to say to sort of round off this chat here, where people can find you, or if there's any upcoming projects of yours that would be nice for people to know? Or
Yeah, I can just invite everyone. Like, if you're actually interested in learning from the original indigenous elders themselves. So we have these videos. We filmed these interviews directly with them. So they speak in their language. We just had them subtitled.
mm,
And this is like the raw knowledge. It's
mm,
not the 10 steps to Kogi success or any kind of that modern YouTube bullshit in that way. But it's just really original, authentic things. It doesn't make it more easy. It's not for everyone to go down that path. But if you feel
mm,
called, that is something that, yeah, I can only invite you to come and to actually say, okay, I'm interested in the real stuff.
great. Mm,
And that is something that of course can be found in other places, but not many other
mm.
places.
Yeah.
And
Seems
yeah,
to me that the Kogi, like the fact that they have asked you to do this communication, and that like like the Kogi and the other groups down there, are they called Arawako, or there are a
Arhuaco
couple
and
of different?
Biwa, and
Yeah,
Kankwamo, the other
there are a
groups.
couple of different groups there, and their indigenous knowledge is unique on the planet. But that doesn't mean that you should start buying a ticket and go down to the Sierra Madre.
Exactly.
They don't need to be flooded by hippies, but their knowledge is being made available through
Mhm.
your online academy there. So
Exactly. That's also one of the points. So we don't need people to go there, and they will not talk to you. So there's no point of going there anyway. At least not about the relevant stuff.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's actually their wish to have the knowledge transferred in that way also,
yeah,
and not have people coming there and actually destroying the culture. And of course, I understand it. Everyone thinks, well, it for me it's different. I'm an exception. Well, it's not.
yeah, yeah,
It is an impact, and it
yeah.
is not what they wish for.
And the important thing, I think, with you and to everybody, with Lucas, is that he was invited to
Yes.
come there. He was asked specifically, do this for us. So that is very different. It's fundamentally different from all the people who go down to Ecuador, do ayahuasca, and then go home and start giving courses and these sort of things. It is a fundamentally different thing that as I feel what you're doing. Like, you're basically making yourself into a mouthpiece and also a mediator, because I have listened to some of the interviews on your platform, and it's difficult to understand because these mamos, they are speaking inside their very intense cosmology, but then there are other videos where you are communicating about it and trying to mediate
Mhm.
basically this understanding. So thanks a lot for the work that you're doing here. It's really fascinating, and also for, of course, bringing it to our part of the world. So,
Yeah. Thanks for the
and
invitation, Rune.
yes, and thanks for for being on here. And I hope to meet you live one day. If
Yeah.
you're back in Germany, then we're probably not so far away from each other.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Der bergast fyrir frelsing og engan réttlátan skal sett helsing varje kur risar och trött våknade stridsmän ganga och vötter varje kur risar och trött våknade stridsmän ganga och vötter